The triad is a lively scene as springtime dances in, homeowners are ready to sell, and their built equity is a win. Great homes will be for sale with a new deal behind each door. The Sharp Mortgage Team is excited to help in the spring of 2024. With wisdom and commitment, we'll help you chart your move. A quick conversation and pre-approval will get you in the groove. With pre-approval secured, you'll be steps ahead, you'll see, ready to embrace the home buying journey with confidence and glee. From cozy cottages to sprawling estates, you'll find the perfect fit, and your real estate agent's skill set help and determined grit. With a wealth of knowledge and a heart for your buying success, we'll navigate the housing market, ensuring nothing less. Don't let the media fool you. You deserve a wonderful new nest. With the Sharp Mortgage Team, you're poised for nothing less than the best. Embrace the warmth of springtime, flowers, and skies of blue. Partner with the Sharp Mortgage Team. We're always here for you.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, it's real estate time here on the podcast. We've got our guy Blake Ginther with the Ginther Group in Winston-Salem. Blake, people will be listening to this after Mother's Day, but we're recording on Mother's Day. You got big plans for the moms in your life?
We did send a tasty treat to my mother, which is the number one way I think for her to feel loved.
Nice.
In addition to a FaceTime that's obviously going to happen.
Yep.
And then my wife is getting her treat now, which is peace and quiet by herself for probably 36 hours or so before spending the day with us on Sunday.
Attaboy. Look at you. You're a busy guy. You're running things in the real estate world, but you're still making time to play daddy. I don't want to say Mr. Mom. I don't think that's an appropriate way to say.
I think in today's world that we'll get beat up for that for sure.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's probably not appropriate for 2024, but we'll just say you're being a good dad. You're being a rock star dad.
Thanks,
by making sure that you've also got the house in order, things going well with the kids, so that your wife and the mother of your children can spend some time away.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will, I'll hopefully do more than just keep them alive. She will come home to a clean home and hopefully bathe children, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Rad dad was the phrase I was looking for.
Yes.
There you go. Almost made you spit out your drink on that one. All right. So today we're going to get into something that we've been talking about for quite a while. And I know we're going to sound like a broken record, but we're going to try to put a different spin on this particular conversation. And look, a lot of the noise and news about real estate has to do with whether people are buying homes because of where interest rates are compared to where they were, back during the craze of just past COVID or even before COVID. I mean, people were getting interest rates below 5 not that long ago, and now they're back to more normal rates. And so with some of this, it's causing a lot of conversation about whether people are buying their first home, transitioning to a new home, refinancing, all this kind of stuff. But today, Blake, I wanted to at least start off with something I read earlier this week. And the source on this, I'll link the story in the show notes, but the source on this is the New York Federal Reserve. They conducted a survey of renters across the country. And 40% of renters, according to the story, believe that they will at some point transition from being a renter to a homeowner, meaning 60% if they're renting, I don't know if I'll ever get to the point where I'll own a home. They don't believe that they will.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, so what's your reaction when let's start with just the headline or the survey results. And we'll try to tie it back to things locally, because I think there is some stuff that's relevant here. But you hear that, and are you surprised by that number at all?
I mean, sadly, no, I'm not surprised. And my immediate reaction was sadness. I think that is probably, hopefully, a little cynical, understandably so, given the costs that we're dealing with currently, right? The interest rates certainly are impacting the first-time home buyers the hardest, right? Combined with inflation of prices for everything, but specifically real estate. So I get why a poll of 10 people or 100 people, only 40 would say that they intend to buy. I do. I get that. Now, the challenge is I don't know if a year from now anything's going to be easier, right? Everyone's like, well, interest rates will come down. I mean, by how much, right? I mean, and if prices don't, then all they did was miss out on another year of equity, most likely. And I think what the number one reason, before we hit record, that I said I feel sadness to this is that it is still the greatest opportunity for future wealth building, right? For generational wealth building, really. What people can do, the utilization, there's still there's still depreciation, there's still the tax benefits combined with. I just had a home buyer buy a home in 2018 for, I think, gosh, it was like 220, and they sold it for like just under $500,000. And they made some improvements, but essentially they accidentally flipped their primary home and they cleared like 300 grand.
Wow.
Right. And these are people, I mean, we're talking 220. It wasn't, they put, I think, 10% down. They put $20,000. So for $20,000, 5 years later, they walked away with 300. There aren't a lot of opportunities for life-changing financial wealth, long-term wealth than that, right? And that's what real estate can do. Now, not everybody has that story, but there are more people who have that story these days than don't.
Yeah.
So yes, the bar got harder to get into, right? To enter, but the bar also has raised a lot and given people a lot of financial opportunities for wealth, and they don't have to sell it to capitalize. That's the other thing I want people to hear on this too, is when you do a cash out refinance, which obviously isn't happening a lot right now. If you have a 3% interest rate, you're not going to cash out refinance, most likely.
Right.
However, we'll get back to, there might be a time where somebody keeps the home and refinances from a 3 to a 6%. Well, why would they do that? They would do that so that somebody else can continue to pay down their home, and they can take out that $300,000 with no tax break hit at all. Yep. Even if it's not their primary home, right, Adam?
It's not classified as income, correct?
So that tax out refi or cash out refi is another huge opportunity, which is a segue to what we were talking about beforehand. I've talked myself out of we're approaching double-digit sales with people who the number one question I ask them is, well, let's explore all options. My job, right, is to provide all the options as it pertains to their real estate world. If you don't have to sell, should you to buy, right?
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's the question is, maybe people just automatically go to that conclusion and say, well, if I'm going to buy a new house, clearly I'm going to sell the old one. But you're making sure to ask the question just because of, is it because people might be locked into a really unprecedented interest rate on their current home?
Yeah. Yes. And if they don't need the cash, if they don't need to cash out refinance, if they don't need, if they have a 3% interest rate and their taxes, insurance, and mortgage are $1,500 and they can rent it for $2,500, they can hire a property management company.
I'm no math major, but
they can pay a property management company 10%, right? And they can still clear $750 a month.
Yeah.
And
just continue to build equity.
And just continue to and here's the other thing is, this is the thing that I've always said to people as it pertains to investing. If you buy a home and for the exact same price you sell it 10 years later, and you never made $1 of rent, you still made 8%.
Yep.
Because they paid off your mortgage. They paid down your rate. So, which, by the way, of course, never is a thing. You're always going to make money on it, or you shouldn't do it. And the home is going to be worth more in 10 years. It just will, right? So the bottom line is, let's talk a little bit of negative of that is, I am hurting by that conversation. I am also not just hurting hurting the sales numbers for my firm, but more importantly, I'm hurting the inventory. And no doubt that is absolutely playing a factor. There are
Yeah.
less people. And for the first time in a long time, I think rentals are getting a little saturated in our market. We do have a fair amount of rental opportunity, which we didn't have just a year ago. There are a fair amount of rentals out there.
It's a good point in what you say about inventory, because so is this correct if I say that in a situation where you're asking, do you have to sell to buy? And the person says, well, not necessarily. They're then buying something that is making up that inventory, but they're not putting anything else back on the market. And so now inventory is decreasing by that one house. And anytime that happens, it's just going to continue to go down.
That's right. That's right. And that has absolutely played a factor.
Yeah.
Because we were talking right before we hit record, move ups for obvious reasons are at an all-time low. Right? I mean, you guys are in a perfect scenario, right? Of potentially wanting to move up. We talked about it a long time ago.
Yep.
Interest rates being what they are, house prices being what they are, they're just, the appetite for it is low. Right? I mean, it is, you have to be in such pain or hate your neighbors so much, right? It's just, there's just not a lot of reasons why it's happening. And so it all makes sense. First timers, back to what we initially talked about, and renters buying is probably the greatest opportunity right now.
Yeah. And so a little bit more from this story. And I think this bullet is does a really good job of illustrating what you're saying, that you can look at this in a negative way, or you can look at this and say, here's why the opportunity is such a good investment. So it's in terms of the biggest reasons why renters don't, the 60% of the renters don't feel like they'll ever be able to buy a home. I mean, most of them are saying interest rates, right? Getting a mortgage is difficult because anybody who bought 3 years ago is getting great interest rates, and now it's they don't think that they're good interest rates. But they're normal. They're just a lot worse than what they were 3 years ago. Right. But here's the one. Americans expect, and again, this is from the New York Federal Reserve survey, Americans expect mortgage rates to keep climbing and home prices to go up 5% in the next 12 months, almost double the annual rise they expected in 2023. So you can look at that and say, I won't ever be able to afford a home because they're getting more and more expensive. I don't know about you, Blake, but I also look at that and say, well, that right there tells you what a great investment it is if you can somehow figure out a way to make it work.
That's right. I mean, absolutely. There you can, and neither side of that coin is wrong or not reality. It's truth. It is still a very good investment. I mean, hard assets in economic downturns also are the best so even if we did take an economic downturn, this housing/hard assets are what everybody wants. So, and prices will eventually soften because our inventory is trickling. I mean, trickling up, right? But I also will tell you, Adam, a ton of the out-of-towners, as we sit here in not quite mid-May, almost mid-May, it's not, they haven't come yet in the droves, and they're either not coming, which could happen. Most likely they're coming and they just haven't come for whatever reason in the amount that they normally do.
You're talking about the out-of-staters that might buy up the inventory.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not necessarily mad at it because we don't have a ton of inventory to begin with. But I will say that there's no doubt that our market it's the strangest market in the sense that only because of what we're coming out of, right? People have these are so tired and exhausted of it. I still have clients, by the way, who lost 6 times in a row, 7 times in a row, and put themselves on the bench. And now they're coming back in, but they still have that abused mindset of bidding war. So I'm hearing
still got those battle scars.
Yeah, they do. And they don't want a bidding war. So, but they've overcorrected And instead of avoiding a bidding war by making a solid offer in a timely fashion, not rushed, timely, they're dragging their feet and then losing because there's still a very solid offer typically coming in on a good home, and so there's a lot of like angry folks in locally in our market, just surprised that things are still selling, and it's like, I mean, I don't know how else to tell you that. Why are you surprised, right?
Yeah.
I did a market update that was borderline worthless, where I basically said, stop thinking you're supremely weird. You might be borderline weird, but if you like it, chances are somebody else does too.
It's time to get serious about your financial future. It's never too early, but it could be too late to get started. And that's oftentimes the hardest part, getting started. How much do I save? Where do I invest? Do I save for college or retirement? How much for each? And who do I talk to about it all? Okay, we'll keep things simple for now and help you answer the last one. We recommend you begin with a local financial advisor. And that's Jennifer Johnson of Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. She'll sit down with you for a complimentary introductory consultation and go over all of your questions. Get started on the path to achieving your financial goals. Visit 3magnoliasfinancialadvisors.com or call 336-701-1600. Get comfortable with your financial future. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. Retirement, financial planning, and investments. Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Three Magnolias Financial Advisors. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors and Cetera Advisor Networks are not affiliated. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity.
What would be your advice? I don't know if maybe advice is the wrong word, but what would be some of the questions you might ask somebody to try to understand whether or not they're making the best decision for them when somebody says, I'm just reluctant to buy a new home because I don't want a 4% jump in my interest rate?
So if they're current homeowners, I would say, I get it. Maybe you shouldn't. I'm not here to sell you on an upgrade.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about why am I here to begin with? So what are your pain points, right? I wouldn't be here if there weren't some pain points.
Right.
What are your pain points? Would an addition, do we need to talk to a general contractor? Because that's the other thing. People moved in COVID, right? Because they couldn't get contractors. So
Yeah,
they're like, I can't build a screen and port, so I'll just move, right? That's not as much of a thing anymore. Contractors are still very expensive. That same screen and porch that was $25,000 pre-COVID is now $70,000, and I don't see that changing. So that might make you want to move. But let's talk about your pain points. Let's talk about what has me in your living room to begin with, probably, right? And then financially, do you have to sell can you keep this great rate?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you should. And that's, people go, wow, I don't know if I want a rental. Well, it's just another asset, right? That can be totally managed by somebody else, right? That you don't have to deal with, and somebody else pays down and your kids inherit.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
And you can use it, by the way, cash out refinance in 10 years, 15 years to pay off college or whatever, right? That it can be that. My parents put all three of their kids through college utilizing their home.
Really?
Yes. I didn't realize that, but they didn't tell me that until like 5 years ago. But
wow.
They paid all three of our colleges, right? A big part of them, through their home equity lines. And they would then, pay them down, and they just cash out refinance. They were really, really smart with the utilization of their home.
Mm-hmm.
So, that they bought for like $100,000, have spent a ton of money in over the last 40 years. And it's of course worth, $500,000-$600,000. So that they'll never sell, literally never sell.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you're doing something nice for your mom on Mother's Day then.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But I would say the conversation, so with those folks, it's pros, cons, it's financial opportunities. It's the people that are renting that, if you're going to be in a city, if you know you're going to be in Winston for 3 years, you need to buy. And you go, oh, I don't like where I'm buying. I don't like the lifestyle. Well, okay. At some point in time, you need to think about the future. You need to think about your financial future. And yeah, I get it. If you want to be downtown, you probably aren't going to buy what you want if you need to be walking distance to downtown, right? So get it. Live that life. Live that life. But eventually you should start considering your future, your financial future. And when that comes, you can still buy, by the way, a really nice house in Winston in the Triad for in the twos. You just might not be near downtown.
Yeah. And that's okay, because in Winston-Salem or Forsyth County, you're probably 15 minutes from just about anywhere you need to go. 15, 20 minutes.
You can be on a farm in the middle of nowhere and be 15 minutes, right?
Correct.
So
correct. And if you're a renter, I think you might hear someone might hear that, okay, well, it's sad because renters don't think that they'll ever be able to buy. And if home prices continue to go up, renters just may not be able to afford to buy. And that might be true depending on what you're renting. But Blake, we talked about this on a previous podcast. Renting is super expensive right now. And so you might not pay that much more, if more at all, for your mortgage all in than what you're paying in rent right now. And even if you are paying a little bit more, it's worth it just to be able to build something in terms of equity or have something that you can own and then, invest in, and it's going to grow over time.
So I'm going to say something unpopular that it reminds me a lot of my Midwestern upbringing, Adam. I think that they need some tough love. I think that renters need some tough love. There are a lot of people who honestly are struggling and can't even consider purchasing. And I'm not talking to those people right now. I'm talking to the people that are paying a lot of money in rent and can afford a very good, and by the way, they don't need more than 3%, 3.5% to put down. So if you're paying 2,000 plus in rent, you probably can afford 3% of a 200. You should have, right? Hopefully you have $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 in your bank account to be able to buy a 200 or even slightly below, depending on how far you're willing to go, townhome or home. And what that will be worth 5 years from now, that $200,000 purchase will most likely be worth 225 to 240, and you can refinance, cash out, and take it, hold on to it, and go buy another home, maybe closer to where you wanted to be in the first place. But all of that to say, right now, there's a lot of my Midwestern mother was very much a suck it up, Buttercup, get over it, you'll be fine. And I want to say that's what I want to say to people who really can purchase but are putting themselves on the sidelines. They got to suck it up. They got to get over it, and they got to get in.
I don't disagree. We bought our first, and we were renting for a little while, and we bought our first home at a time when only one of us had a full-time job, but we weren't making a ton of money, and we bought our first home at 135. 135 was the price of our first home. Yeah. And it was a good home. It wasn't near downtown. It was in the south end of the county. And I mean, you've seen it before because you helped me sell it
yep.
3 years ago. But that was our first home. And we moved. We had our first child there, had enough bedrooms, had enough space for all of us, 2-car garage. We had a good life there. But it was what we could afford. We didn't feel like we had to go buy a $300,000 house at the time. Yeah. And then we moved in 2014 into the home that we're in now, but we kept the other one and we rented it. We rented it for 7 years before
at a higher interest rate, at a rate that wasn't this
correct
interest rate.
Correct. And then we sold it 3 years ago, sold it for less than 200, but still made money on it. made money on that investment, even though we sold it for less than 200. And so, yeah, it may seem like all the good homes out there are $400,000, $500,000 and above. You can, like you said, you can still find something for 200 or maybe even less. I don't know how much is going to be out there for less because home prices have gone up quite a bit since we bought in 2008. But yeah, it was such a smart decision on our part, and we didn't feel like we were in a position financially to purchase a home, but we made it work, and I'm glad that we did it.
And you know what? When you said that story, and I know we're running long, so I'll be short. But when you said your story right there, the number one thing I thought about was I hear people, the first timers in particular, saying things like, well, the housing market's I feel like it's gonna bust or it's gonna come down, and I'm thinking, that person that grossly overpaid at the time, right? Beat everybody out for your house that right just under 200. She could sell it tomorrow for probably 300. Right, because she bought it in COVID, and that makes you upset, and I understand. And
little bit.
Hurt your feelings. And I don't know if, depending on what she's done, if she hasn't done much to the house, it's probably 250 to 260. But if she's made some cosmetic improvements, she might be able for 20 grand of work to be all the way up into the upper twos, because 50% people gain 50% of equity in just that 3-year run of COVID that will always be asterisked. And where I'm going with this is first timers, you are not going to be you in particular, if you're buying 325 or below, or median or below price, construction costs will not allow that home to get any cheaper, right? So like you're not buying at an inflated price because it can't go down because of construction costs and land costs and just real world stuff. Even if we have an economic big old fall, right? Big old slide, or even a recession, which we're not seeing any signs of. But even if we did, that price point is the most safe.
Yeah,
right?
Totally agree. Full transparency, our home grew in value from where we purchased it to where we sold it, about $60,000 in value. And what you're saying is even in the last 3 years, it may have gone up another $50,000-$60,000 in value.
That's
right.
So
that trend, while maybe not going up at that rate, the trend of real estate and home prices, especially in North Carolina and Winston-Salem, because of where population is growing.
Yep.
There's never any guarantees in investing, but real estate, especially in this area, is a pretty safe bet right now.
I'm gonna say one last thing. Housing market and the stock market, for most people in the last 4 years, they've made a lot of money. It's been, I'm talking 50%. Some people, like I'll candidly tell you that when I met with my advisor the other day, and I was blown away. Basically doubled in 4 years. Right. And I was somebody, and my whole profession, by the way, is really bad about putting money away. Right. Realtors suck at putting money into 401ks. They just, because they believe in real estate so much.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I was kind of like, old school. And when my dad said I should do this, and my grandpa was a financial guy, so I'm going to do this. And obviously I'm thrilled that I did it. And same with any homeowner, potential homeowner, you will not be mad. You won't be thrilled with what your money gets you right now, but you won't be in a year either.
Yeah. You think that your proud Midwestern mother will appreciate if we just title this episode "Suck It Up, Buttercup"?
Yeah, I think she would. I think she would listen for sure. She'd go, "Oh, this sounds interesting." Yeah. Okay. Midwestern was, I got in the car and she'd say, "Honey, that was a good game. That was a good game. Could have done better. What happened on that goal? What happened?"
Yeah. And then the sweet Southern family, they get in the car. It's like, "Did you have fun today? You played really hard. I'm so proud of you."
My kids they get both of it, dude. You're dead right. My wife 1000% is so Southern, and she definitely struggles with my Midwestern, like, I mean, Jack, scale 1 to 10, how hard did you try? What did you?
Yeah. He's like, I'd say about a 9. Oh, so it could have been better then.
I mean, there's room.
Why wasn't it a 10? All right, let's wrap up. Give the folks the ways that they can get a hold of you and your team.
Give us a shout at 336-283-8689, 283-8689, or find us on the interwebs at theginthergroup.com, theginthergroup.com.
Appreciate it, Blake. Enjoy your Mother's Day this weekend, you and your wonderful family, and we'll talk soon, okay? Good conversation today.
Appreciate you, brother.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode on the Triad Podcast Network. Our mission is simple: provide information, advice, and stories about the people and places that make the North Carolina Triad such a great place to be. You can find us by searching Triad Podcast Network on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much wherever you like to listen. If you like what you heard and want to support the show and those that contribute, we would truly appreciate a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It helps spread the word along, as do your shares on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Triad Podcast. To get in touch with us, simply email info@triadpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.